was born in Borneo, Sarawak, in a town called Sibu. And my dad owned a shop in a rural area of Sarawak when I was young. So the place is called Balingian, as shown is in the picture. So behind our grocery shop, this is a grocery shop, there is a longhouse, Ibang longhouse, which we live together in the neighborhood. So most of our customers are Ibans. So these Ibans, they are very festive person. They celebrate New Year, Christmas, Gawai, grandly. So those are the time when our shop got the best business, you know. They're going to buy a lot of homemade chicken, they're going to buy a lot of beers, they're going to buy a lot of soft drinks or cakes from us. And since I was young, I used to ask my parents, why am I look so different from the other kids around us? The face feature, slightly different. My eyes is a pet, and their eyes are big and brown. So my parents bought a house when I was 8 years old, and our house is 2 hours drive from our grocery shop. When I enter school, then I started to make friends. My school was in a town area. After I went to school, I actually hesitate to go back to the grocery shop or even to help out my dad. The reason is, in Balingian, it's like cut off from the outside world. We don't have clean water. So if we want to get the water, we have to pump all the way from the river. So the water is brown in color. You have to filter it before you boil it or you use it. Or sometimes we will store the water in a tanki. It's a big container. Or sometimes if we don't have enough water, if the rainwater is too less, and my mom will say, so we're going to reserve more water for cooking and drinking. So today you're going to take bath with your dad by the river. And we don't have electricity. We have to get a generator to get a light at night. And we don't have internet signal, no phone signal, and there's no telephone signal at all. That's why I felt so bored there. Then I chose not to help out my parents afterward. So when I was, during that time, newspaper is something very exciting for my parents because there's the only source to connect them with the outside world. And often when I read the newspaper, or even sometimes in the classroom in textbook, I read a lot of story, you know. The teacher or the news would tell me, hey, you know what? There's a continent called Africa. So in Africa, people is very poor. They don't have food, they don't have water, no electric supply. And I feel like, hey, this sounds very familiar. It's like the place I lived. And then very contradicted is that my teacher used to tell me we should be very grateful to stay in the country because we have everything. We have water, we have electric, but when I look back at the place I grew up, there's nothing about that. So I started to realize that what I see in media sometimes doesn't actually reflect the truth. And I read, and then I decided that maybe someday I can write something about my hometown, about the place I grew up. So then I finished my high school. I went to university. My result was quite good. I got a scholarship, JPA scholarship to France to study engineer. I went for orientation for 1 week, then I quit. My parents were so mad. Then I went for a private university. I studied actuarial science because I was told it's a good job to make a lot of money. And then I joined for 2 years. Then I realized I didn't like it. So I quit. I used to get lost a lot. And I tell myself, okay, maybe it's time to take a break. So I saw something in internet saying there's a thing which is called gap year, like traveling around, backpacking. So I feel like it's maybe a way to find myself. Maybe I can find my calling during the kind of trip. So I spent 6 months, worked in KL, saved some money, and went for 7 months trip in 8 countries, which is including 8 months in includes 2 months in Afghanistan. Before I entered Afghanistan, I didn't tell my parents. I was just a backpacker. So after I went there for a week, I called my mom. Hey mom, I'm in Afghanistan. So you know, our impression on Afghanistan is war country, terrorist, suicide bombing, and you are a foreigner, they're going to kidnap you, you know. Everything is so bad. So of course my parents are so worried. So I said, no, so far so fine, and I'm going to stay here just for 1 month. So after a month, I called my mom again. Hey mom, I'm going to extend my visa for another month. So I stayed for 2 months. She's very angry. So the reason I stay there is because after a week or two I was there, it changed my perception on the countries. It's very different from what I saw or read in mainstream media. Of course, there is some terrorist attack happens once in a while in the country, but what I saw when I was there is the hospitable of the people there. I was a very poor backpackers, so during my trip I just had one meal in a day, and I tried to save up money. So there's 70 to 80% of my time in Afghanistan I was hosted by the locals, either by couch surfing, it's a online website, and most of the time it's like I just ask someone, random Afghan people on the street is if they can host me. And yeah, I got a lot of I met a lot of good people. They invited me to stay in their house for a few days, and they fed me well, and they gave me the most fabulous food they have at the house, like, you know, fried chicken, some beef. You know, they love beef in Central Asia. So I was just wondering when I was eating, are they so rich? Because when I say in a house for, let's say, 5 days, 3 meals, lunch and dinner, I will always get this fried chicken, you know, Coke, 7-Up, a lot of things. I was wondering, isn't it Afghanistan should be some places that is very, very poor? But and then so one day when after I eat, we were eating in a different place. I was eating in the guest room, so they are watching me eating. So they eat in their own kitchen, separated from me. So I was curious. So one day I just sneaked into the kitchen and I saw them eating. What they are eating is just a piece of bread and some yogurt, no vegetable, no meat. So that's the time when I realized that they try to be very, very kind to guests. They are just like any good host we have around the world. We can't generalize Afghan as a terrorist because of what we read in mainstream media. There's always two sides. Of course, I didn't mean that there's no terrorists in the country. There are some people who are very extreme, but always there are a lot of good people as well. There's good and bad. That's why I learned from Afghanistan. And then I met one old man during my visit in an Afghan village called Bamiyan. So this old man, he thought I was a journalist at that time, 2012, but I was just a backpacker. So he just came to me. He told me about the bad situation of the village. You know, like he complained like we don't have all these basic needs, even medical helps or education system. They are neglected by their own government. So they told me, hey Chris, maybe you go back to your country. You're a foreigner, right? So when you go back to your country, you can tell your government that in Afghanistan, so we have this situation, you know, ask your government to help. So you are a journalist, you are a way for us to get help. I felt very guilty that time because I was just I was just a backpacker. Then along the way, I started to think a lot. And when I came back to Malaysia after the trip, I decided to study mass communication. And I started as a freelance journalist as well. Then I traveled to Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Egypt, Turkey, and a lot of Middle Eastern country, even Africa as well. Um, I started to convey the message that I see through newspaper or news portal, and I saw some changes come, the impact of journalism throughout this experience. Then I came into journalism. I see the changes that journalism can actually make. For example, like my story on jihadi in Syria get attention recently, and our government is trying, not recently, but 2 years ago, and it comes to a UN conference, and we talk a lot about anti-terrorism, and some of the organizations, NGOs, they heard about all these abstract stories when I was in Syria, so they use the stories to promote it and get funding to help the Syrian people. So that's the things that I saw when I was on the ground. And the reason I wanted to be a journalist, and I am a journalist today, is I still believe that to tell a story is something that can change life. And sometimes journalists ourselves, we can be part of the story, and then we can help to make this world a better place. And this remind me of my Balingan, Ulu Balingan, our grocery shop back then. The story was untold until it was demolished in May 2017. All the shop was demolished because they wanted to build the Pan Borneo Highway in Sarawak. So we got our shop demolished, and I can definitely relate this kind of pain or loss to how the Afghans and Syrians lost their families or their homes whenever I was there. Yeah, I truly believe that what we usually see in a mainstream media is there's two sides, and we have got to filter it. We have to see in a good way and see in a bad way, and we try to think it critically. And as a young people right here, right now, what I want to say is that I think it's good to make mistake in your life, like what I did when I was in trying to shift from one course to another course, and I just graduated end of last year, which my friends, most of them graduated a year earlier than me. So I think it's good. It's fine to make mistake because we learn from the mistake, and then we grow up from there and we become stronger. And as for my war experience, it's more to, I think, as long as we plan something, we know what is the consequences, A and B, we go for it, as long as we can bear the consequences or the risk. And then you just go for it and live for now. That's it. Thank you.